Hey there, today I'm showing you how to paint this gouache landscape. So as always, at first I put down some washi tape. You can use any kind of tape. I just happen to have a lot of washi tape at home. And then I started by wetting the paper. I used a lot of water here, and this is actually a watercolor brush. And then I added in the paint and just very little paint compared to the water. This is the only part where I'm going to use that much water because I wanted it to look a little bit like watercolors. And I used a lot of water, so I had to remove a little bit of it again so that there wouldn't be those puddles. And you can always do that with a dry brush, the way that I did it here. By the way, all my favorite products are always linked in the description box if you're curious what I'm using. And yeah, I just did this kind of effect to get those clouds. It's a very light blue color. And then I started off with the foreground and I mixed a green tone. And here you can see that I took my time to mix all the colors. And yeah, I just have my favorite colors on this palette. It's a custom palette. And then I mixed this green tone. You don't have to mix the exact same shade if it's a little bit hard for you, but you can use a similar shade or you can use any kind of green that you like. And I started off with this section that you can see here. It's sort of behind all the other parts of the picture other than the sky and the house or lighthouse. I really don't know what kind of house this is, but this is kind of in the background. But I started off with very light tones and then went back in and made it darker and darker, built my colors just as I would do with watercolors, but gouache is way more forgiving, so you can also go from dark to light. But in this case, I just went from a lighter tone to darker and darker, built up the shadows and the lighter areas. Here I mixed a lighter green tone, and for the shadows I used this brown tone. All in all, this piece has a lot of brown, green, and yellow, orange tones. I'm not sure if I like the color palette, but I stuck with the one on the original picture. And yeah, I think it has kind of its own style. I don't know. So here you can see that at first I added in the darker parts and then the middle parts, and then I blended those together because blending with gouache is really easy because you can reactivate the paint with water. So you really don't have to stress yourself to get it done quickly. You can always go back and blend everything in. And here I started off with the pieces that are more in front, and I just started off with a light gray wash, and then I did the shadow parts here again. I just used kind of the same approach as I did with the other part and just did those brown shadows. I looked at the reference picture where the shadows are. And by the way, you don't have to copy every stone the way that I did it here because those are rocks and everything, and nobody's gonna be able to tell if this looks completely the same or not, because I don't know, I feel like rocks and nature are really forgiving when it comes to that. You can kind of put your own spin to it and nobody's gonna look at the picture and say, oh my gosh, this rock was there and that one was actually not. So just do it and don't force yourself to make it perfect. Here you can see that I started with a very saturated green tone. I desaturated it a little bit again so that it wouldn't pop just as much as it did here. So you can see that I was experimenting a little bit as well, just trying to figure out how to do this, and I went in section just as you would on a kind of a paint by numbers piece where you do the shadow parts and the lighter parts and the middle parts in different colors, and then later on I mixed everything together. I blended everything because, like I said, you can do that with gouache. And here I added in those orange yellow tones, and I actually really like this color, and I think that it looks very similar compared to the reference picture. And yeah, I just did more of those sections, then made the shadow parts even darker so that we have a little bit more contrast here. And by the way, if this tutorial is a bit hard for you and you want to have more of a beginner's approach, I have 2 Skillshare classes on gouache. One of them is a step-by-step tutorial on 2 landscapes. So it's like this tutorial but very slowed down, very simplified. And the other Skillshare class is a beginner's guide where I talk about gouache, how to blend it, how to get the right consistency, how to mix the colors. I will link those classes in the description box, and you can always also get 2 months for free with my link. So check that out if you haven't done so yet. And here on our picture, you can see that I added in even more parts. It looks like a huge mess at this point, but that's no big deal. You just have to trust the process because sometimes it has to look worse before it gets better. So here you can see that I added a thicker layer of this green tone. It's more opaque because it has more paint and more white in it and less water. And yeah, I started doing the lighter tones here, and it gives everything a little bit more definition, and we start to get a little bit of contrast here, even though it still looks like a hot mess. But bear with me, it looked better in the end. And yeah, I started painting those little flowers that we have here and doing those middle parts that aren't completely dark and not completely light, so just those middle tones, and starting to blend everything a little bit more. And I think that it already looks a lot better now, and we already have more of a definition here. And yeah, I just went back and forth all the time. It doesn't have to be one thing and then it's done. You can always go back, add stuff in. If you feel like it needs more contrast, then use a darker tone somewhere and add in more shadows, or add in a lighter tone. So here I started with this house, whatever it is, and I put it in the middle and I made it a little bit bigger compared to the reference picture. I think that it looks kind of cute the way it is now. And yeah, it's just this very simple shape. I did this in this kind of brown tone. And whatever this is, maybe it's a well or something like that, but it was there on the reference picture and I felt like, yeah, why not add it in? And for this part, I used a smaller brush to add all those details here. I don't know, it's this weird shape with, I don't know, I really don't know what this is. Maybe it's a lighthouse, maybe it's a church and this is the bell. I really don't know, but here I made sure to have those details in there, and I think that this adds a lot of definition to the picture. And I added in a little bit of those details to the house as well. Obviously added in the windows and doors and everything, and also a little bit of the brick texture. You will see that later. And for the windows, I used a very opaque white tone, so very little water, a lot of paint. And I think that this makes it pop so much more. And yeah, here's a little bit of white highlight as well. And then I added those cute little birds in the sky. I didn't paint all of them. There were a lot of them in the reference picture, but I felt like those are maybe a bit too much and I just did some of them, and I think that it looks really cute. It adds a little something to the picture. And when the white parts were dry, or at least they were supposed to be dry, I added in the frames of the windows with a black color. And here you can see that I added in a little bit. Here are the bricks, a little bit more details to our little house thing. And then I went back into our other areas and decided that it needed just a little bit more definition. It needed to pop a little bit more, and that's why I added in more shadows here, just a dark tone, and then I blended that in with all the colors. And I feel like you can really see here that gouache is so forgiving and you can blend it so well, because I went back in here and blended everything together. And this is just so much fun because I don't know, you can always go back, and you can really overwork your pieces with gouache if you want to. So you have to stop yourself at some point. But I feel like for me personally, I really love this medium. And yeah, I just did a little bit more of this part, blended everything, and went back and forth until I had the kind of look that I wanted it to have. And here are a few tiny little highlights with the lighter tone as well. I think that's just a white tone, and blended that in as well. And yeah, we're almost finished with this piece now. So if you decide to paint this one, tag me on Instagram. Make sure to tag me on the picture, not just in the description, so I don't miss your post. Tag me at Visual Mind Art. I really hope that you liked this video, and if you did so, please give it a thumbs up and please subscribe to my channel. And until next time, goodbye.